A PRP is a policy research project, so we contract with real-world clients, and in the case of our PRP, it's the Department of Defense.
And this PRP was designed to analyze the aid flows to Africa with the specific goal of identifying how much of that aid is contributing to climate change adaptation and what are the challenges on the ground to implementing that adaptation aid.
So this is a huge issue in our PRP. It's one of the first things that we tried to figure out in our PRP is what adaptation actually means.
Many development aid projects have components which arguably can contribute to climate change adaptation in the long or short term. But there are very few instances of where you actually have a distinct adaptation project that doesn't have any other spillover effects. So parsing those out in practice and trying to distinctly account for what is adaptation aid different from what is development aid is nearly impossible and in some instances undesirable.
For example, if money's going for a irrigation project in a rural village, is that climate change adaptation or is that just normal good development practice?
And so as a class we had to come up with what we wanted to focus on and what we thought was the best scheme to define adaptation. Right, so that's one of our big challenges and why we are going to the countries to try to talk with organizations and get information firsthand.
The problem is each of these donors who are doing climate change adaptation projects report the information differently. So we go back through their specific project documents and look for documentation, descriptions of the projects. Some donors describe the projects very thoroughly, so in that way it's easy deciding the intentions of the projects, and other donors are very vague, and so we're just going off of a maybe 3-sentence description.
The World Bank has made tremendous progress with their open data initiative in terms of putting this project information online, easily accessible, and easy to use. At the same time, other donors have not done that. So tracking down their project documents is kind of like an Easter egg hunt on a 40-acre farm. Good luck. Well, the Kenya trip happened in December 2010, and I went with my colleague Josh Busby and 4 of our students. And the purpose of that trip was really to start to talk to international aid donors, national government ministries, and NGOs about this sort of big, broad question of international development aid and climate change adaptation. Nairobi is the hub for international development aid in Africa, and many of the donor organizations have mission offices there and other large presences. So it was a great opportunity to go to one place in a concrete amount of time and be able to talk to as many people as possible about this big issue.
Our trip to Kenya had a couple purposes. One was to ground truth the maps from the PRP last year, to see if the areas that we thought were most vulnerable to climate change are the same as the areas that people working on the ground think are the most vulnerable to climate change. Another was to get a sense from development practitioners what's going on with climate change adaptation aid, to see if the way we're understanding aid for climate change and what qualifies as aid for climate change adaptation is the same as their understanding.
With every organization we talked to, they talked about how there's this huge influx of aid for climate change projects, and all organizations are trying to get some of this money that's coming in, whether they deal directly with climate change or not. So I think it's really important to figure out where this money's coming from and what organizations are doing with it.
Mapping development aid is important for a number of reasons. One is for donor coordination. So one problem is that many donors don't know where the other donors are working. So if we're able to map where existing development projects are occurring, there can be increased donor coordination.
I hope that first and foremost it has an impact on the way we think about implementing the broad global agenda of enhancing aid transparency. I think what we've illuminated are a lot of the challenges inherent to getting donors to actually make the reporting standards consistent, report on their detailed activities, and so forth. Personally, what I hope is that the students learned a lot about how to design research, how to think about complex problems, how to conduct fieldwork in difficult places. And I think that they learned an immense amount about how to conduct interviews, how to work in messy and sometimes non-existent data environments, and also complex political settings. A lot of the questions they were asking about aid dependency, about shifting priorities of donors, about donor-government relations, touched on a lot of political nerves. And so they learned what it meant to do research and real political life